Hello YouTube, Code here, with an installation guide for Debian Linux. This guide will cover a minimal installation that can be used for many different setups in the future. Debian makes for a seriously amazing server operating system, and it's also can be used for like a really stable and fast desktop operating system, because it has a huge, really well maintained repository with a dedicated team and large amounts of guides and resources online you can find pretty easily. I'll be making more tutorials for Debian in the future, such as like game servers, web servers, torrenting seed boxes, music and video streaming servers, Dropbox clones, and probably also just showing how to set up a secure and fast desktop. To get started, you can just go to debian.org and download the newest version. This will be an installation guide for 8.4, although basically any version of 8 is going to work pretty much the same, and when 9 comes out it won't be too much different, though if it is I'll make an update video. Anyway, you can just click here to download 32-bit or 64-bit network installer. If you're using something other than 32-bit or 64-bit processor, you can go to the Getting Debian section, download an installation image, and then just over here pick which one you want. You can also download it via torrent, and if you're on Windows, I'd recommend Deluge or Transmission if you're on Linux. I'm going to be installing it with Oracle's VirtualBox, so it's actually just going to be a VM, but the guide should be pretty much the same if you're installing it on an actual machine. If you're using VirtualBox, you can just follow along. So I'm going to make a new virtual machine, select Debian. It'll be 32-bit, though it's basically the same for 64-bit. I'm going to give it 2 gigs of RAM, but you can use more or a lot less too if you don't have very much. It doesn't take very much to run a really minimal Debian installation. Alright, I gave it a 20 gigabyte hard drive, but you can use more or less, and it should be fine. If you're using VirtualBox, you want to select the actual ISO, so we'll come in here, go into storage, and then choose disk file, and we'll select Debian 8.4, click OK, and we can power this on. When you're on your actual computer, you'd want to obviously put it in the disk, and you have to navigate through BIOS to start it, but once you get it started up, you can just install. We're just going to go with the normal install option by hitting enter. There's a bunch of different options though that you can sort through. It'll load in, and here we go. Select your language, English of course for me. Select your location, the United States for me. And you can select your key map, basically all the default settings if you're in the US. And then we'll wait for it to load everything. Alright, once it's loaded everything, it's going to ask you for a host name for your system. This is basically your computer's name as far as your network is concerned. So for me, I'm just going to go with TUT. You can pretty much name your computer whatever you want, but I'm just going to name it that for tutorial purposes. Domain name, you're basically not going to really need this if you're just setting up your own little home server. So I'm just going to leave it blank for this, and you can always change it later. But essentially, if you're with a big network or something, you might use this, and if you're setting this up for a business, you'll probably already know what it is. Okay, you'll need a root password. This is basically going to be for your root account. You're not going to use it for your regular account, and usually you're going to want to use something pretty complicated. So basically it should be over 12 characters long, that type of thing. I'm just going to go with, a really simple one that I use for tutorials and stuff. So I'm going to type that in real quick, and it's going to ask you to type it in again, and then it's going to want you to put in your full name for a user account, so I'll put in mine. And you can obviously, you don't have to put this in, you could just leave it blank, but yeah. And it's going to want me to put in a username, and it's going to want a password for my new user account. You should make it be a different password, obviously, than your root password, and your root password definitely has to be really secure, because if you have FTP or anything like that, people could log in from other, they could just log in from their house, and especially if you're like port forwarding, obviously, if they're connected to the same network, then you're kind of screwed. But even if it's just kind of like a smaller server, it's still a good idea to have really secure passwords just in case. Select your time zone. Okay, now it's going to want us to partition our disks. We're just going to go with the pretty simple setup. If you wanted to do encrypted, you'd come down here, but we're just going to use the entire disk, and we're just going to make this really easy. Now, a separate home partition is usually a good idea, but we're just going to go with all files in one partition just to keep it really simple. Okay, it's going to ask you to confirm everything, and you can just hit OK. It gave us a swap partition and a partition for everything else, basically. And then we'll just wait for it to format, and we'll be good. Alright, once it's done installing all the base packages, it's going to ask you to pick a mirror so that we can update everything and install any packages that didn't come on the disk or whatever. If you have any proxy information, it's going to ask for that, but for most of the stuff we can pretty much just skip it, and obviously pick the first mirror because it's going to be the one for the US. If you have a different mirror or you live somewhere else, then you can pick one for your country. Okay, partway through installing all the packages from online, it's going to ask you if you want to participate in their package usage survey. Basically, it just runs like once every week, I think, and like doesn't use like any. It just like runs once. It's just this little script, and it just like tells the developers what packages you're using most. I always participate in it, but you can skip it if you don't want to. But it helps with the development of Debian. Debian's free, so I feel like it's just kind of the right thing to do. But if you don't want to, it's fine. You can just hit no. Alright, here we go. Now we're at the interesting part. Basically, there's a couple different options you have when you're installing Debian. You can, and you hit space to either select or deselect any of these options. If you want to install a desktop operating system, you would pick one of these desktop environments. XFC and LXD are probably the most lightweight ones on this list, right? LXD being the most lightweight one. Both of them are relatively similar to Windows if you're used to that. They have the bar at the bottom and stuff. If you're using a faster, newer computer and you still want something that's similar to Windows, Cinnamon is probably your best choice, or maybe Mat. Although Mat is a little bit more outdated, I guess. Or not outdated, but it just looks a little bit more retro. Then you have GNOME, which is really nice, but it's a lot different than Windows. It's gonna have, like your bar at the top to switch between your programs. You kind of like can move your mouse to the corner, type of thing. It's a lot different than Windows, but it's really fast and nice. And if you want to try something new, that'd be my recommendation. There's also KDE, which is also a lot different than Windows, but maybe a little bit more similar than GNOME, I guess. But KDE is also really nice, but it's going to take some getting used to. So, I'll probably make videos in the future comparing all of these desktop environments, but we're just going to install a server, so we don't even want any of the desktop environment stuff. All we want is standard system utilities and SSH server. The rest of the stuff we'll install on our own later. If you're doing the desktop environment setup, though, and you want to follow one of my tutorials for that, you could look at my videos on the different desktop environments whenever they come out. But for now, we're just going to install these for our Debian server. Alright, we're on to the last step pretty much. We can install grub, which is a bootloader, so that we can actually boot into our operating system. And if you didn't, make sure you pick your right hard drive if you have multiple. It'd just probably be SDA, but if you have multiple hard drives, it'd be whichever one you want your operating system installed on. If you didn't install a desktop environment in the previous section, you still can when it's done, if you just follow this tutorial exactly. And I mean, I'll show that in whatever future videos I make for setting up Debian as a desktop operating system, but basically this is just like a really minimal installation with just SSH and the system utilities. You can pick one of those desktop environments if you already know which one you want, but a lot of servers won't use desktop environments because obviously it's going to like use up resources for the server that could be used for actually like powering whatever application you're running. Anyway, the installation is complete now. You can just remove the installation media, your disk or whatever, and reboot it. In my case, I'm just going to tell VirtualBox to boot off the hard drive, which it's obviously going to open up grub. If you just wait 5 seconds, it'll boot already into Linux, but you can also just press enter and it'll start it. But yeah, we're basically done. We now have Debian Linux installed. There we go, it's all booted up. You can log into the account you made. You can also log into root if you type in root and then the password. But here we go, we have our prompt, and we'll be able to download packages and set up a server or download a desktop and set up a regular desktop computer from here. But yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next video.